Well, hey everyone, welcome to the Mind of Christ here on YouTube. My name is Justin Amos, and I am really excited for today because we are joined by a very special guest, Mr. Tyler Zock, and we are going to be discussing the connection today between the Enneagram and mental health. Tyler, thanks so much for joining us, man.
Justin, it's great to be here. Thanks for what you're doing. You're putting out some great content, and the topic today is huge. And I've enjoyed getting to explore this topic more since you invited me to come on to talk about it.
Awesome, awesome. Well, just a little bit about Tyler. He's a nationally known Enneagram coach. He's the author of 9 books, the Gospel of Enneagram devotional series for each type. I've read his book for Enneagram 2s, and it is fantastic. My wife has read his book for Enneagram 9s, and they are both highly recommended. As part of today's interview, we're actually going to be doing a free book giveaway, an autographed book by Tyler. So all you have to do is click the link below, just give us your email, and you will be automatically entered to win a free book. Currently, his available books are for types 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 9. Books on types 5, 7, and 8 are going to be coming in the near future because they have not been fully released as of yet. Is that correct?
Yeah, sevens will be
Okay.
out in August, and eight will be out in November, and then five
Okay.
will be shortly after that.
Sweet. Okay, awesome. Good deal. So if you want a free book autographed by Tyler, hit the description below. Geez, I can't talk. If you want a free book autographed by Tyler, just click the link and you'll be automatically entered to win. And he will pick a winner 1 week from today. Tyler operates mostly under the name Gospel for Enneagram, and you can find him on basically every social media platform available. So please be sure to subscribe and follow him for great content related to the Enneagram. So Tyler, before we dive in, I wanted just to give you an opportunity to share anything else that you'd like about your family, your work, or just what you've been up to lately, if there's anything you'd like for our viewers to know about before we start.
Well, I love this topic because my youngest son is on the spectrum. He's 9. My oldest is a type 6 and just struggles with a lot of anxiety, as a lot of sixes do, low grade anxiety. And my wife is a 6. And as a 3, I used to think that mental health issues didn't really exist. you know, uh, I was just very positive, and anyone can just put their mind to something and get out of bed and do it. Early on in my pastoral ministry years, I had very low empathy for people who struggled with mental health. And I was like, why can't you get out of bed? Just, read Psalm 42 and and ask the
Figure
Lord
it
for
out.
help and figure it out. And I was a horrible pastor, horrible pastor. And it wasn't until I went through, a season of infertility with my wife
Mm.
and really battling things that I could not overcome in my own flesh or my own strength, caused me to slow down and to explore some of these issues. And so I just think this topic is incredibly helpful. And just want you to know that I've been wrestling with this myself and with my family. And it's just so important for us to understand these things so that we can have more empathy towards each other. So glad to be on, man.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So, kind of my plan for today is to just go through each personality type on a few minutes and I'll share just briefly some of the mental health tips I gave for each type in my Enneagram mental health series I did recently. And then I'll let you add your insights just based on your personal knowledge and just your research. And I know you've done some recent polling with some of your social media followers. So, does that sound good?
Yep, sounds great.
Awesome, man. Okay, so we'll just start with Enneagram type 1s. So 1s are often called the perfectionist or the reformer. 1s are very responsible. You can always count on them. In my video on mental health for 1s, I talked about how they often struggle with having a very tough inner critic. It can be very difficult, and just have very high standards for themselves. So I said it's important to question the inner critic and have them ask themselves, why do I view myself that way? I think Brene Brown said it best when she said, speak to yourself like you speak to someone that you love. Really critical, especially for type 1s. And then the second mental health tip I gave for type 1s is to celebrate the small wins in their life because they have a tendency to be so, critical on themselves. It can be easy just to kind of overlook just little steps they've taken towards healing or growth. Maybe they had a hard conversation with someone to set some boundaries. And rather than just kind of dismissing them or downplaying them, ones could really benefit by celebrating those wins as really, not the key component, but certainly a key component, to helping them have thriving and flourishing mental health. So those are a few things I came up with. So I'd love to hear what insights or awesome knowledge you'd love to drop with number ones related to the connection between the Enneagram and mental health.
Yeah. So in addition to the inner critic that you talked about, which is so good, one sense of responsibility is a big deal. So feeling a strong sense of responsibility for everyone and everything can just lead to anxiety and fatigue. Like the weight of this responsibility that they carry can be overwhelming, contributing to a constant state of worry and exhaustion. It's hard to
Yeah.
shut that responsibility off. And that's why going on vacation or going out into nature where you're not responsible for anything can be extremely helpful with your mental health.
Yeah.
Another aspect is not feeling good enough. Ones want to feel good, moral, ethical. They don't want to feel bad or flawed. And so struggling with perfectionism or being good can contribute to feelings of, not being good enough, potentially leading to a spiral towards depression. And so
Yeah.
this relentless pursuit of this unattainable ideal can take a huge toll on their self-esteem and just overall mental well-being.
Yeah. That's excellent, man. Whew.
But
That's
so
really
I
good
say to
stuff.
ones, you are perfectly human.
Yes.
Like you're not the goal is not to be perfect. None of us are going to be perfect in this lifetime, but to realize that humans make mistakes and the mistakes aren't sins.
Yeah,
Okay. So just
absolutely.
because you made a mistake today does not mean that you are bad or sinful. Like
Yeah.
humans make mistakes and you are perfectly human.
Yeah. Ooh, that's excellent. Good stuff. All right. Anything else before we dive into twos?
Let's go to twos.
All right, let's go to twos. All right. So twos are often called the helper or the giver. They're loving, kind, and they're great at making people feel cared for. I'm a two, so I'm probably a little biased. I think they're pretty awesome, arguably the best people on the planet. You might have other thoughts, Tyler, but hey, yes, for another time. So,
Hey, twos oftentimes have a positive self-image, and that's why they cry when they read about the Enneagram. So like,
yeah,
oh, there's a shadow side to me here.
yeah,
Everyone tells me I'm like Jesus and helping everybody, and that two is
yeah.
Jesus's type, you know. But the Enneagram also shows you, where you're going to struggle as well.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so twos can struggle often with being people pleasers. And, this can cause living as a people pleaser can cause a lot of stress, a lot of worry, fretting. So, a helpful question to consider as twos when you start going down the people pleasing trail or narrative is, I found, asking yourself, will this matter in 1 year?
Mm.
Heck, I mean, even 1 week. I mean, for a lot of the stuff twos can fret over, will this matter 1 week or 1 year from now? And the answer to that question, I feel, can really give a lot of perspective of whether or not this is worth thinking about and fretting over, or, causing anxiety. So that's a really good question I found helpful. And the second mental health tip I gave in my video is that because twos are really good often at meeting the needs of other people, we can struggle with being aware of our own needs. And so I challenge twos to start paying attention to what you need. And I'm talking about more so just the emotional needs. Just, being aware, do I need encouragement? Do I need guidance? Do I need affirmation? What are those emotional needs that you have on any given day? And then be vulnerable enough to express those needs to someone who you think would be able to meet those needs. So those are two tips I think can be really helpful for the mental health of Enneagram 2s. So I'd love to hear what insights or thoughts you have for type 2s.
Yeah, I found that exact same thing. That prioritizing others' needs over your own needs is a huge area of struggle. Another one would be your ability to absorb others' emotions. So
Okay.
twos have a tendency to absorb the emotions of others and feel responsible for their happiness. And so this is an emotional burden that they carry that can lead to being overwhelmed and just difficulty in setting healthy emotional boundaries. Uh, this all impacts their mental well-being.
Yep.
Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely. That's 100%, 1,000% spot on.
And so that might be hard for a two to actually, realize at first because it's just so default. Like the
Yep.
reason I feel sad right now is because that the room feels sad or they feel sad. I remember we had a small group over at my house, and there were my family, and another family. We each have sons with behavioral challenges, and they both got into a fight in a yelling match and began wrestling. And I could
Mm,
see the two, who's not a part of either our family, just feel the weight of the anger, the hostility, what was happening. And she left frazzled because she just
wow.
absorbed all of that negative energy into herself. And that's what happens to twos all the time, is they carry that. And so they have
Yeah.
to work on setting up a boundary and realizing if they're not responsible to keep everyone happy. That's not their burden to carry. That's the Holy Spirit's.
Yeah.
And then
Absolutely.
another issue is for twos is feeling unnoticed and unappreciated.
Yep.
So when their efforts, or when your efforts go unnoticed or unappreciated, twos can experience feelings of disappointment and self doubt that they're worthy, because again they have a lot of need a lot of external validation like us threes. So this lack of recognition or lack of returning the help back to the two can potentially lead to depression, questioning their self-worth. Maybe my friends don't love me, maybe they don't care about me, they don't seem to be reciprocating. And so just that the relational side of their life, feeling unnoticed and unappreciated can
Yeah.
take emotional toll.
Ooh, that is spot on, man. Spot on. I never knew until I got into the Enneagram. I always have had this gift. I can walk into a room and within a couple minutes, like I know what's like I can feel kind of what's going on. Like if it's
Hmm.
heavy, if it's sad, if there's anger, if there's tension, like I'm just aware of it. I never really understood how I could do that, but the Enneagram has given me a lot of language to better understand that and how that's a gift and a responsibility. But like you said, it's not my job to carry the burdens of every single person. So I have to have healthy boundaries in knowing what's mine to own and what is not mine to own. Right.
Hmm. Yes.
So, yeah,
Well
good
put.
stuff. Moving on to
Okay.
threes.
Yep.
Okay, let's do it. All right. So threes are often called, and you're a three, right?
Yep.
Okay. So threes are often called the achiever or the performer. They tend to excel at life. And as the name suggests, they're very high performers. In my mental health video on threes, I encourage them to write down all the things that they love about themselves. But instead of writing down the things focused solely on kind of what they do, I wanted everything to be about who they are as a person and their character. What do as a three, kind of questioning yourself, what do you love about yourself and the good qualities that make you, you? And then I ask them, to have a few loved ones do the same. Just what is it about them, who they are, that they love and that their loved ones love apart from anything that they do? And then another tip I gave threes is to encourage them in some disciplines or some practices that produce no results, such as prayer or meditation or, just extended times of solitude. Doing this will just kind of wither away some of that belief that you are what you do, which can be just so naturally ingrained in type threes who want to be achievers. And then type threes would benefit greatly with their mental health by just being vulnerable with a few trusted people in their life rather than feeling they got to put on a facade of I'm competent, right? I'm performing, I'm killing it at my jobs. Just have a few people in your life that you can just share your real pains and heartaches with, and that can go a long ways in just the mental health of type threes. So, is that accurate? What else would you add?
Yeah, I agree. Lindsay,
Okay.
who's a type 6, who's not impressed with what I do. She's not impressed with image, or the masks I wear, has been extremely healing for me in my mental health.
Awesome.
Just helping me to feel love for who I am, not what I do. So she's kind
Yeah.
of it stinks because you want your wife to be impressed with you all the all the time.
Sure. Yeah.
But she's not impressed with the things that could lead me to think that I'm lovable for what I do. Like she likes who I am. And
Yeah.
even when I, as a three, had to like shave my head when I turned 30, I had like really nice hair. And it was like going through a mental health crisis, like depressed, I'm losing my image,
Yeah.
I'm losing my
Oh gosh.
value. And she's
Yeah.
like, "You're the most handsome bald man in the world." She just
Wow.
uh kept encouraging me
Yeah.
in all the right ways.
Wow.
So I love that. A
Yeah.
couple other things I've noticed for type threes are just the pressure. Threes experience immense pressure to achieve and perform at a high level, often surpassing their own limits, trying to surpass their own limits, so they can be competitive with other people, which is what the general description of threes, but they can also be very competitive with their own past goals and not be as
Oh,
competitive with other people. So
wow.
this
Okay.
pressure can be overwhelming and just lead to stress and anxiety when you feel like you just have to keep treading water, keep going, keep rising higher, or else you have no worth. Like
Sure.
Madonna was a three. She said, as soon as she came out with the popular album, the next day she felt worthless and had to go strive for the next, record the next album because that's where
Wow.
she found her worth. So just that pressure, it can lead to a lot of stress and anxiety for three.
Wow.
Similar related is an overloaded schedule. So threes often struggle to identify when their schedule becomes overloaded and the fatigue starts to set in, and they may not realize that they're crashing and burning until it's too late, impacting their mental and physical well-being and the health of their family and their kids.
Sure.
You know, that's a big
Yeah.
one for me. And then the next one, last one would be an imposter syndrome. So I think threes and some other types can struggle with this too, but I know definitely threes do. That after achieving something, threes often experience this what's called the imposter syndrome, uh, and so they doubt their own worthiness and they fear being exposed as a fraud. So this
Wow.
internal struggle can really undermine their confidence and contribute to feelings of anxiety and self doubt. So it looks like,
Wow.
for me as a pastor, when I got up and preached, I would preach confidently, do my three thing and,
Sure.
make it look good and try to impress people. But then I would sit back down and say, you know what, that wasn't me. That was just a mask.
Mm.
Like they're impressed with the
Wow.
talk, they're impressed with what I did, but if they knew the real me, then they wouldn't be impressed. So they're just
Wow.
deceived. And so even though I need the affirmation in their compliments as sort of gas to put in the car to keep going, that is it's not doesn't really even work because I'm like, oh, I just deceived them. I'm just an imposter. I'm a fraud. If they knew the real
Wow.
me, then they wouldn't love what they see. And so then it just, it goes between performing and then feeling a lack of worth, and that can cause a lot of anxiety under the hood for a three.
Wow. That's excellent. I had heard of the imposter syndrome struggle for threes, but I've never heard it fleshed out like that. So that's really helpful. Good
And part of that's
stuff.
by four wing too. I think I know fours
Okay.
can feel the same way. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
that can lead us
Right
into
on.
into fours now.
Sure. Yeah. Let's go into fours. So, fours are often called the romantic or the individualist. They long to stand out from the crowd, but sometimes the desire to be unique and different can lead fours to being so tough on themselves that they can struggle to really love who they are. And so, the first mental health tip that I gave in my video for type fours was to learn to love yourself. And that can be a journey for type fours. Fours would benefit greatly from remembering that they are exactly who God had in mind when He designed them. And fours are also unafraid of their emotions. And so, there's a lot of good in that, but there can be some struggles in that too. So, that leads me kind of to the second tip I gave. Rather than feeling sad or just letting yourself stay sad or in just this melancholy state for days or weeks at a time and not really doing anything about it. I said that fours could benefit from starting to consider what your emotions are trying to signal to you. you know Pay attention to, are you sad because someone crossed a boundary in your life and that really hurt you? Is there an issue maybe that you need to address with someone and that's why you're sad? So really our emotions are oftentimes a signal that we need to pay attention to something. So all types, but especially fours who are good at feeling every emotion would really benefit from paying attention to what their emotions might be signaling to them and then respond and act appropriately based on what they discover through that process. So that's what I had for fours. I'd love to hear your thoughts and insights for type fours.
Yeah. So for all the heart types, two, threes, and fours, there's this lack of self worth. There's a feeling of, I don't know if I'm valuable or lovable. And so the twos try to go out and help other people to overcome that anxiety and that perceived lack of value. Threes try to impress people with what they do, and fours, try to be try to be special. Okay, try to be unique and set apart. But fours are highly sensitive to criticism, so they just absorb criticism more than any other type.
Yeah,
And I can feel a little bit of this because of my heavy four wing. So
sure.
so fours absorb just like twos, like we talked about with you, absorb feelings in the room. Uh,
Yeah,
fours absorb criticisms, judgments, negative messages from others, messages that aren't negative, but they feel like they're negative. Like if someone,
hmm,
you know, says something, they can twist those words or color it in a negative
yep,
way. And this can distort their self-image and then trigger feelings of inadequacy and unworthiness. Like, oh, I'm broken, I'm flawed, I'm, just on the island with these misfit toys. And so they need to learn to establish healthy boundaries to separate their self-worth from these external opinions of
yeah,
others.
yeah.
Another one would be feeling misunderstood. So fours
Okay.
often feel misunderstood and different from others, which can create a sense of isolation and detachment. And so this feeling
Okay.
of being an outsider can lead them to retreat or not fully engage in social interactions. So
Hmm.
in my type 4 book, I talk about how 4 is like it's Christmas morning and the family's opening their gifts. The 4 is in the room with all the other children, but it feels like for the 4 that they're on the outside of the house looking in the window at everyone else. So that
Wow.
they're present, but they don't feel present. They feel like they're an outsider looking in because they're just so different from everyone else. And so
Wow.
this feeling of being misunderstood and not belonging leads to a lot of just feelings of alienation and isolation and being alone and feeling abandoned and all those types of emotions. So it's hard even when playing a board game. they, they can they can feel like they're not one of the you know insiders or one of the group, and it's hard sometimes to fully engage in what they're doing, whether
Oh,
it's a conversation or board game or whatever. So this is a huge
wow.
struggle for fours.
Wow. Okay. That's good stuff. Anything else before we go on to fives?
Yep, and go to fives.
All right. Sounds good. So, type fives are often called the investigator or the observer. They are very analytical. They love making sense of the world. They love acquiring knowledge. And because they can get lost in their thoughts, the first mental health tip I gave for fives in my video is to get in touch with their emotions rather than focusing solely on acquiring more head knowledge or continually analyzing everything around them or in the world. Utilizing a feelings wheel can be super helpful for all types, but especially type fives who can really struggle to know what they're feeling. The second mental health tip I gave for fives is it's really more of a question to consider frequently. So I think fives with their mental health can really benefit by asking themselves, whose life is flourishing because I keep giving my life away? That's a great question for fives to ask because fives can have a tendency to hoard their time, their gifts, their talents, and their resources. And so, fives asking themselves this question can really help their mental health because it helps them realize that they're connected to others and that other people need the great gifts and just the talents and just the character and the great things that they offer the world. So that can really help not only themselves flourish, but their friends and loved ones flourish as well. So that's what I have for fives. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, when fives are battling mental health, they can think that life is meaningless. So at their worst, fives may experience psychotic breaks with reality or
Hmm.
just conclude that life is meaningless. Uh, coping with existential questions and finding purpose can be overwhelming for them, which, affecting their mental well-being. Another thing I've noticed and I've heard from fives is they can struggle with obsessive tendencies. So they can develop obsessive tendencies such as excessive researching, excessive analyzing, accumulating information, and they can't stop accumulating more information. So this behavior, like driven by a desire to always feel uber prepared and competent and secure, can become compulsive and it can
Wow.
interfere with their daily functioning and pulling the trigger on projects that they need to get done or want to do, but feel like they can't because they're not, competent enough to do it.
Yeah.
And then lastly, social pressure and anxiety is a big one for fives. So fives often
Mm,
struggle with the social pressure to engage with groups, especially in the church world. Right, fives is
yeah.
the
Yep.
church world, evangelical world is not a comfortable place with the social pressures that come with that, and they may have a diagnosed or undiagnosed social anxiety disorder. So the
Wow.
need to withdraw and protect themselves can hinder their ability to navigate social interactions. So I
Wow.
know that that's something that fives need to be aware of is, they might have a diagnosed or undiagnosed social anxiety disorder. And, it's something to pay attention to if you feel yourself really uncomfortable in small groups, around large crowds, and it's something to give your give yourself empathy for, and then share that struggle with others so they can have empathy for you and not just put all this pressure on you to do all this stuff. If that
Wow.
makes sense.
Yeah, that's excellent. I mean, your last point is fascinating in itself. Just, potentially, just being aware of possibly having social anxiety. The first one really resonated with me. I'm a type 2, but I have diagnosed obsessive compulsive disorder. So
Mm,
hearing you say that about fives, that makes me want to get to research. I'd be curious to see if that's a pretty common connection, having
mm.
struggling with OCD with being an Enneagram 5. That's fascinating. You
And
Yeah,
I'm
you
glad that you
bringing
brought
that
that
up.
up, and I'm thankful that you shared that because not you can't, Claudio Naranjo, who came up with the Enneatypes, went through the DSM and started to overlay, uh, some of his knowledge of psychiatry
Yeah,
with each Enneagram type, and you can't you can't cleanly say, okay, this type struggles with this disorder, this type struggles with this disorder. But there are some types that struggle with a certain disorder more than others, and so
sure.
it's good in terms of probabilities, not absolutes. So there's a high
Absolutely.
probability for fives that they may struggle with social anxiety disorder. So pay attention to that. It may not be absolutely true of you, but something to pay attention to.
Oh, that's excellent. Good stuff. All right. Want to move on to sixes?
Sure.
All right. So sixes are often called the loyalist, and they are master troubleshooters. They can foresee problems ahead of others, and they can put a master plan together to keep people safe who are potentially at harm. As their title suggests, they're also very loyal and committed to the people and the things that they value. Sixes have a strong desire for safety, and they frequently think about and prepare for what could go wrong in the various situations of their lives. Living this way can be exhausting for sixes, and it can cause a lot of anxiety. So, the first mental health tip that I gave for sixes in my video was to learn and practice some breathing techniques, some breathing exercises to help calm their body, to help lessen the anxiety, and to ground them in the present moment. So there's 5-5-5 breathing, there's 4-7-8 breathing. If you're a Christian, there's numerous breath prayers that you can find online that are used quite often with Christians in the East. It's a little more foreign and seems kind of weird to some Christians in the West, but it's not weird at all. It's really helping Scripture become as natural as breathing. It's a really beautiful thing that all types can benefit from, but especially sixes who are more prone towards anxiety than other types. And the second mental health tip I gave for sixes actually came straight from you, Tyler. It was one of the resources you sent me, or somewhere I read that you said sixes would benefit by asking the question, what's the best that could happen? So rather than thinking, what could go wrong in this relationship or this situation, what's the best thing that could happen? And that type of perspective shift can really lessen the anxiety that sixes can be so prone to kind of naturally gravitate towards. So That's what I got. Some of that's already from you, but I'm sure you have additional insights and knowledge to share as well on sixes.
Not a lot. You covered it pretty well. They sixes, just so you know, you're the you can be the most courageous type of any other type. You can be the most fearless when it comes to being in the worst case scenarios.
Yeah.
But where the anxiety comes in, the low grade anxiety is when you're not in crisis situations and just in a normal situation like this, running on the treadmill or going for a walk, your mind is naturally, when you're not in crisis mode, naturally goes to the what ifs. Well, what if this
Yeah.
happens later? What if this happens tomorrow? And that's where the low grade anxiety comes in, is it's hard to shut that off. And
Yeah.
it's a superpower. If you ever watch the
Mm,
superhero movies, they all have their Achilles heel, it the their their greatest gift is also the greatest curse.
yeah.
So six is being able to be able to think through all the worst case scenarios to protect us all, as you can imagine, is going to lead to stress and anxiety,
Yep.
having that superpower. And so I would say that sixes just need to be aware of the fact that they may be susceptible to panic attacks,
Wow.
and to
Yeah.
be on guard for that. And if it does happen, to go get help and realize that that's just
Yes.
it's just one of the things that flows out of the superpower of being able to spot danger or spot
Wow.
dangerous people. Okay. And so it's nothing
Yeah.
to be ashamed of. It's just something that is an effect of the superpower that you have. Um, so um, yeah, that's gonna be huge. Another thing that
Yeah.
I'll say for
Totally.
sixes is the to not look past the impact of abusive authority figures in your life. So negative
Mm,
experiences with authority figures, who engage in abusive behavior, can have long-lasting psychological consequences for sixes. So recognizing and addressing the impact of these experiences, including PTSD or potential PTSD, depression, anxiety disorders, difficulties with trusting yourself, and difficulties with self-esteem, may be flowing out of an experience with an authority figure.
wow.
And that just happens because sixes are tuned to authority more than others. And so they oftentimes will go on this pendulum between trusting a leader and trusting them too much, and not looking at their flaws. Because again,
Mm,
sixes, they want security and support. That's their core desire, is to have security and support. So they're not off on their own, but they're a part of a wolf pack. And so
mm,
that's why they constantly think about authority, because they're like, I need somebody to guide me. I need somebody to keep me safe. And so they naturally will either trust or overtrust a leader, or do the good bad split where this leader is all bad, you know,
yeah.
and this leader is not to be trusted, and they can be too suspicious of a leader. Okay. So that is naturally attuned to authority. And so if they run into a negative authority in their life, or a negative boss, or an abusive parent, that can hurt them and cut them so deep for a very, very
Mm,
long time. And so a lot of their counseling work or therapy work is going to have to be going back to that relationship with authority and seeking healing, from those experiences. So another thing
wow.
that I learned recently about sixes that's helpful.
Wow. That's excellent, man. I did not know any of that. That's fantastic. This conversation is making me want to go back and start doing a lot more research on this stuff. So
Well, yeah,
excellent.
like you said, I was able to pull my Instagram followers, and it's got a lot of input, which is where a lot of this is coming from. So that
Yeah,
it's
excellent.
yeah.
All right, let's go on to sevens. So, sevens are often called the enthusiasts. They love to have fun, and it's safe to say they like to party. Sevens are adventurous. They often try to avoid pain because that would hinder their fun and enjoyment of life. So, the first mental health tip in my video that I gave for sevens is to stop running from unpleasant emotions and learn to feel your feelings. Our feelings are embodied. We can try to avoid them or suppress them as much as possible, but our bodies keep the score. Our bodies will signal to us, hey, something is not right. You have to pay attention. You have to address this issue. our bodies will literally kind of cry out, if you will. Our feelings do not go away. And that can be really helpful for sevens to know, to really lean into that. And again, a feelings wheel is a great tool for all types, but especially sevens. And then the second mental health tip I gave for sevens is to learn how to fully live in the present moment, which is often called mindfulness. There's nothing wrong with planning fun adventures or enjoyable experiences, but it becomes a problem when it robs us of the present moment, which is all that we have. It's all that really, it's all that God's given us, right? At this time, the past is gone, the future is not guaranteed. So the more we can be present with, the people around us, the more we can attune to their needs, the more that they can attune to our needs, and we can just have more healthy and thriving relationships. So that's what I put for a 7. I'd love to hear your thoughts and insights.
That's good. Navigating symptoms of ADHD is first on my list. So many sevens experience symptoms of ADHD, such as impulsivity, restlessness, and difficulty focusing. And so
Okay.
this lifelong struggle to regulate emotions and keep up in very structured environments, which is hard because of the workplace is a lot of our workplaces are very structured, very predictable. They're not set up for sevens.
Yeah,
So trying to keep up in these sort of unstructured environments and play the game can lead to depression, low self-esteem, and just feeling different, feeling inadequate, like they can't do it. So those are things to pay attention to. Now, I met one seven who said that she didn't struggle with ADHD, but almost all of my seven friends, and I have a lot, I get along with sevens really good. Almost all of my seven friends are taking medication for ADHD. And
wow.
I presume it's just again one of those consequences of their superpower of having sharp uh, minds that they have fast processors. The Lord just gave
Yeah,
them
yeah,
fast processors to be able to create, to think, they're quick on their feet. And when that processor doesn't get shut off and just keeps going, you can see how it can lead to ADHD symptoms of
sure.
not being able to slow down. And again, if you need to take medication, take medication.
Yep.
Don't feel bad about that. Just know that this is a common struggle for many sevens.
Yep.
Another thing to pay attention to is just um, you could be prone to substance abuse. Again, all numbers are, but sevens are very susceptible to turning to substance abuse as a means to maintain a high or escape discomfort. Really
Wow.
discomforting situation. So recognizing this vulnerability, this chink in your armor, and seeking healthier coping mechanisms is absolutely crucial for your well-being. You got to
Wow.
realize that the world is not always rosy, peachy, full of rainbows and unicorns and butterflies.
Yeah.
That the world will punch you in the face,
Mm.
and so don't be going through life thinking that everything's good. Like you really have to create a foundation for yourself where you can tap into your emotions, where you have a support network. Because I've seen sevens when somebody passes away or something tragic happens. Like there was a seven in my fraternity one time. He was the life of the party, a jokester. Something happened in his family where all of a sudden the next day he was gone. He had quit school. He moved out of the fraternity
Wow.
house. No one knew where he went. It's because something tragic happened to him and he wasn't prepared for it. And when that happens, sevens can spiral into the depths of depression and despair, and it can hit them hard if they're
Wow.
not set up for it, or aware that it can actually happen. And at
Wow.
that point, they can fall into substance abuse, escapism, traveling the world, just doing whatever they can
Yeah.
to run from their pain. And so,
Yeah.
what you said about paying attention to your pain is so helpful.
Wow. That is excellent. Man, good stuff. All right. Moving on to eights. So eights are often called the challenger or the protector. And when healthy, eights can literally change the world. I believe Martin Luther King Jr. was an eight. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yep. Harriet
Awesome.
Tubman. The list goes on.
Yeah.
Mother
They are incredible.
Teresa, by the way.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. They are incredible people who advocate for the vulnerable, defend the weak, and fight for justice. And so the first mental health tip that I gave for eights is to put your guard down. by being vulnerable with and showing your weaknesses with some trusted friends. Putting your guard down will allow you to be truly known by others as you really are, and that's what all of us really long for in life. And the second mental health tip I gave for eights came from the popular Enneagram book, The Road Back to You. Speaking about eights, authors Ian Cron and Suzanne Stabile said, when you power up and get angry, stop and ask yourself whether you're trying to hide or deny a vulnerable feeling. What feeling is it? How do you use aggression as a way to hide it or defend against it? Perhaps you're trying to hide or deny feelings of grief, shame, or disappointment. Ask yourself, is there something else going on at a deeper level that is masking itself as anger? And this idea really kind of gets back again to getting in touch with your feelings. Feeling your feelings is so important, but to do that, first, we need to be able to pinpoint our feelings. So, those are just a couple tips I gave for eights, and I'm sure you have some great insight and some thoughts as well.
Yeah, that's good. Difficulty accepting emotions or paying attention to their emotions is a big deal. Like there is such a thing as sadness and fear that they do
Yes.
experience, and paying attention to those things. Because here's the deal: is that aggression begets aggression, and when they walk through life with defensiveness, it will lead to others being defensive. And here's the interesting thing that I found through this survey is that the denial and pressure to be at their best, or to defend themselves and be on guard at all times, can actually make them more susceptible to traumatic experiences, right?
Wow.
Their anger can actually increase their risk of encountering PTSD, because when
Wow.
they don't get in touch with their sadness and fear, and express those things, what it does is it turns into anger, fighting, aggressiveness, which then the unhealthy people will cause unhealthy people to retaliate, and
Wow.
it'll cause them to get into fights, and it'll cause them to get harmed in return, right? And so
Yeah.
eights just have a this is crazy to think about this, but eights have a higher risk of PTSD because of that.
Mm.
And so may have, even my son who's an eight, getting in fights is so easy for him on the playground. And there's so many people that, misunderstand him, misinterpret him, that are aggressive towards him. And that can weigh on him for
Sure.
quite some time. Another thing for eights is that just as sixes live with low grade anxiety, eights can live with low grade paranoia,
Mm.
stemming from this fear of betrayal, fear of being harmed, fear of being taken advantage of. And so this can manifest as sort of muddled thinking, plotting, revenge,
Wow.
or just a tendency towards any sort of acts of revenge. And so eights need to realize that God's got their back, that God's fighting their battles for them. They don't have to fight all of their battles, and just to rest, and put that low grade paranoia to death, because
Man.
it'll eat away at an eight. And here's the
Wow.
here's the thing that people don't realize is that eights need our help and our encouragement and our support all the time, but may give us the impression that they don't need any help. So we can often assume that eights just can handle their burdens, they're tough enough to handle their mental health issues, but they don't need anything from us because they're strong and they got it. But that couldn't be more from the truth, right?
Yeah.
So eights can break this cycle by being vulnerable and acknowledging to a few trusted people in their life, to acknowledge their pain, their sadness, so that they can invite other people to help them become strong, and give them the support they need to work through these mental health issues.
Wow, that is fantastic. Thank you. Good
Yeah.
stuff.
On to the
All
nine,
right,
last
well,
one.
let's wrap it up with
Okay.
nines. Often called the peacemaker. Nines are easygoing, kind, and they want to avoid conflict as much as possible. Nines can be passive and struggle to keep their opinions and needs to themselves in order to not rock the boat or not to be a burden to anyone. So, the first mental health tip that I gave to nines is to pay attention to and express your needs to others. Rather than deny or downplay your needs, express them again to some trusted people in your life to help fill up your relational and emotional tanks. And then the second mental health tip I gave for nines is to make a list of why you matter. Why do you believe that your presence, your voice, and your life matters? Write down all the reasons why you matter and then believe them to the core of your being and begin to live out of those truths. Psychiatrist Kurt Thompson, I'm a big fan of his work. He said to ask yourself this question: whose life is going to be made more beautiful because you walked into the room?
Mm.
And that is such a great question for all of us to consider, but especially for nines who struggle with knowing that, does my presence matter? Your presence does matter. And so the more work you can do in really grasping that truth as a nine can really go a long ways in having good, solid mental health. So those
Mm.
are my thoughts. What other insights do you have?
So good. Well, sometimes I've mistaken some nines to be sixes because they're dealing with anxiety or trauma, or so sometimes nines can look like sixes when they're
Hmm.
struggling with mental health issues, because they may
Yeah.
face a generalized anxiety disorder, resulting in excessive worry and restlessness. So difficulties in asserting themselves can further contribute to their anxiety, feeling that they're constantly getting run over by others. Uh, so this can lead to a detachment from reality.
Yeah.
So when they're battling mental health issues, nine's tendency is to disengage from conflicts, from stressful situations, and it may lead to dissociative experiences. So they may feel detached from reality and sort of existing in a dreamlike state in an unfamiliar world. So
Yeah.
again, they need to realize that when they're detaching themselves from the world, numbing themselves out, often like fives, and they need to re-engage, get help, and reconnect with reality. The last thing I'll say is they need to watch out for the people pleasing trap, like type
Yep.
twos. So nines often rely on people pleasing to maintain harmony. They neglect their own needs, like twos do. This is why nines and twos oftentimes mistype. So this strong desire for harmony can prevent them from expressing their true feelings, their true needs, their true desires, and it can lead them into toxic relationships.
Mm.
So nines and twos need to watch out for toxic relationships. The reason you might be struggling with mental health and the reason you might have low grade anxiety is because you're not fighting for yourself. You're in a relationship. It could be a parent with a relationship with a parent. It could be a romantic relationship, and you've put yourself in this relationship, and you're not standing up for yourself. You're trying to people please them. For nines, is to keep the harmony, right? Uh, and realize that being in that relationship, and again, it could be a romantic relationship, it could be a parent relationship, it could be a relationship with your work, your
Yeah.
boss,
Yep.
and it could be toxic. And the way to get the way to get healthy is to bring what Henry Cloud says is a necessary ending, to make a necessary ending, to leave that relationship, leave that
Yeah.
workplace if it's affecting your mental health, and just to say goodbye. And that's
Yep.
so hard for nines to do because they just want to go along to
Yep.
get along
Yep.
and just be that object that just keeps floating in space just forever with
Yeah.
with that one person, with that one job, or that one career. But sometimes you may need to get out of line and to move in a different direction in order to
Yeah.
stay sane, stay
Yeah.
healthy.
Yeah.
So that's what I'd say about the nines.
Wow, that's excellent. Right on, man. Well, that kind of brings us to the end. In a lot of ways, we barely just scratched the surface, I feel like, with each type and their mental health. But hopefully, in some ways, this has kind of just whet some people's appetite to really start diving into this a lot more. I found it interesting as I've like been on YouTube typing in mental health and Enneagram. There's actually not a lot of content out there discussing the connection between these two. So it's cool to kind of be maybe some of the pioneers in some way, really diving into this, at least on that platform. I've been a little surprised at the lack of content. So I hope this is just the beginning of some masterminds really diving into, the connection between these two. Cause yeah, there's such great intersection between them and can really help people thrive in their relationships. So I personally, Tyler, just want to say, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, just how thankful I am for your work, your book and devotional on type twos and on type nines. My wife and I just devoured them, and just they fostered so many great conversations. And I know this was your purpose, but it really felt like you wrote the book for me and for her. And so I know that's your purpose for each type. And so just thank you for your great work in not only just teaching the Enneagram, but doing it through just a biblical lens. Like, it's just really, it's so needed. And it's really just been an honor, man, to spend some time with you today.
Mm, Honors all mine. Thanks so much for the encouragement. The whole 5-year writing process of writing these 40 devotionals has been so life-giving to me. And
Yeah.
like you said, I get to write it as the book is a letter, not just
Yeah.
about twos, but I get to write it as a letter to you. And so that fills my heart to be able to encourage and equip and empower people. Yeah, it's an honor to be on your show. Thanks for having me.
Well, to all our viewers, before we go, be sure to click on the link below and enter to win a free autographed book from Tyler, and he will announce the winner 1 week from today. So, best of luck, and thanks so much, Tyler. Have a great day, man.
You too.